Welcome to Narrative Responsibility, a podcast about examining the meta-story of your life, how well it is serving you, and how to change it for the better. I'm Elena Wolf, relationship coach and life alignment mentor, and this is this week's New Perspective.
Hi there! I'm so glad you're here today. This is episode 47, Mental Load, the Pink Tax on Women's Mental Health. This is actually an adaptation of a talk that I gave at my university for International Women's Day. Don't get too excited for me. I was one of probably 20 speakers, not like a keynote or something. But since it was basically a free episode script, I decided to adapt it to be a little more like my normal tone here, and then add some extra context and commentary that my 22-minute speaking slot did not have time for. So, yeah, let's jump in. Mental load is becoming part of the popular conversation about relationship health for romantic partnerships. I've seen the Gottman Institute talk about it, at least two of my favorite sex educators have talked about it, and multiple coaches and influencers that I follow on social media talk about it. Generally speaking, mental load refers to the invisible mental labor of managing a household that is separate from but necessary for the actual physical tasks of running the household. It's things like noticing the laundry detergent is low and remembering to add it to the grocery list. Remembering that your kid's school has an end of 6 weeks movie party and your kid can bring a snack. So then making sure in advance that there's something appropriate on hand or acquiring it if need be. Keeping track of when the sheets on the bed got washed and whether the washing machine has had a cleaning cycle run recently and which day is that doctor's appointment that's going to disrupt the normal morning routine so that everyone can be alerted in advance to that change in plans. And cross-checking against your kid's test schedule so that they won't be missing anything important for that appointment, and remembering that it's your sister-in-law's birthday next month and finding out if and when she wants your family there to acknowledge it so that you can block that out on your schedule and everyone else's. And basically, it's being the executive assistant to the house itself and the needs of everyone in it without the salary appreciation or sexy Mad Men pencil skirt wardrobe. In an ideal world, mental load in a partnership is split in an equitable way. Whether that is genuine equal sharing of the burden or one partner taking it on with acknowledgement and support from the other in exchange for not doing something else, or a split somewhere in between based on the specific circumstances for that couple. In the world we actually live in, however, especially as millennials and older, this might be somewhat different for Gen Z, but I don't know. I don't know how many of them are married and generating statistics. But for those of us who are married or have been married in our adult life, more often than not in a male-female partnership, the mental load falls disproportionately onto the woman, especially once children enter the picture. Mental load contributes to women's stress loads, the mental health gap between men and women, and it interferes with both sexual and emotional intimacy between partners. And as a side note, if you are a woman who has been diagnosed with ADHD after you had kids, mental load is a huge part of why you were probably unable to continue coping with your undiagnosed ADHD and masking your symptoms. That basically your capacity was exceeded by the demands of your change in circumstances, where you're not just managing yourself and maybe the household, but now you're also having to manage kids' schedules and probably more of your husband's schedule, just to make sure that whatever he's doing isn't interfering with the expectations for the kids and your family as a whole. So that's why we see a lot of women get diagnosed after they have kids, because the mental load just quadruples and they can't handle it anymore. So My goal today is to speak a little more about this concept of mental load and its impact on women's mental health, and then offer some ways to combat the effects of this phenomenon, whether you are in a relationship that has an unfair mental load split, or if you just think that someday you might enter a romantic partnership which you would like to set up to be equitable and fair for both parties. First things first, let's put some numbers on the mental health gap. A review of anxiety and depression in America published last year by the National Center for Health Statistics, based on data from 2019 and 2022, showed that women are nearly twice as likely as men to suffer from anxiety and nearly twice as likely as men to suffer from depression. Over 20% of women, this is a generous 1 in 5, report symptoms of anxiety, and nearly 25%, so not quite 1 in 4, report symptoms of depression. Let those numbers sink in. 1 in 5 women struggle with anxiety, and 1 in 4 with depression. This data is in line with what mental health statistics have shown since the 1990s. When it comes to the two big mental health issues, anxiety and depression, women in America consistently struggle more than men. Interestingly, both of these conditions can be brought on just by adverse circumstances, where most mental health disorders arise from an interplay of circumstances and genetics. So these two function as kind of a report card for how we're doing culturally. Well, obviously, not that well. We are not okay out here. Researchers have now spent decades looking at these disparities to try and pinpoint why women's mental health is worse. This mental health gap has persisted or worsened even as the gap in domestic labor for households where both partners also work outside of the home has gotten smaller. It's still not even, but the gap has improved. So why don't the mental health numbers reflect that? One of the key factors, it turns out, is mental load. In their 2022 article titled "The Mental Load: Building a Deeper Theoretical Understanding of How Cognitive and Emotional Labor Overload Women and Mothers," Liz Dean, Brendan Churchill, and Leah Ruppener define mental load as the combination of the cognitive labor of family life, the thinking, planning, scheduling, and organizing of family members, and the emotional labor associated with this work, including the feelings of caring and being responsible for family members, but also the emotional impact of this work. This definition is new and a little more nuanced than previous ones, which focused on the cognitive labor alone rather than considering the emotional labor as a separate variable. The cognitive labor is a considerable part of mental load, no question, but they argue that the emotional aspect is what makes it so burdensome, because caring is not a task with a beginning and an end. Caring is a state of being, and it is pervasive. Caring has no boundaries, no time limit, and no set of completion criteria. Basically, if you care for your family, you don't ever stop caring. There is no point when you turn that off in the course of a day and get to have a break from the fact that you care. There is also a pattern with the types of household labor and cognitive labor that men and women perform, which also plays a part in disparate mental loads. Anna Catalano-Weeks and, again, Leah Ruppener explored this in an article titled "A Typology of U.S. Parents' Mental Loads, Core and Episodic Labor," which was published in 2024. They were investigating whether household tasks are another way that we perform gender. In other words, would there be patterns between the types of tasks men took on versus those that women tended to do? The short answer is yes. What they found is that women, even when they also work outside the home, take on a much higher proportion of the daily, ongoing tasks in a household, the things that can't be put off or ignored, while men tend to take on irregular, episodic tasks. In other words, the labor men tend to do around the house are one-and-done tasks that fall outside the daily routines of a household so that they can easily be put off until a time that is more convenient. Additionally, many of the typical male-performed tasks are ones that either take him away from the home or require total focus, like mowing the lawn or getting the car serviced or dealing with a repairman, so that those tasks could not be done alongside watching the children. In contrast, most of the tasks women tend to perform allow them to keep an eye on the kids simultaneously. So, even when the tasks and the cognitive load appear to be split evenly on paper, the qualitative aspects of what is being done show that, in fact, the daily burden is not split evenly. The daily burden of making sure everything runs smoothly for everyone, of showing up for everyone else's needs day in and day out, that is carried by women. The pervasive drain on focus and mental energy that is watching over small children is carried by women. The inescapability of chores that never actually end only cycle through daily phases of less done or more done. Things like dishes, things like laundry, things like picking up the toys. That is carried by women. The ongoing burden of trying to anticipate needs and hopes and attempting to make life more meaningful for everyone is carried by women. This emotional labor, this invisible, unquantifiable, ongoing energetic expenditure is the cultural tax women pay to be part of a family. Our mental health pink tax, if you will. The term pink tax has been around since the early to mid 1990s and refers to consumer price increases on products and services marketed to women versus men. The political concept of the pink tax is that women's products are arbitrarily given higher prices, essentially as a price gouge on female consumers. This definition was really interesting for me because I had personally thought that the term referred to the fact that being a woman requires the use and therefore purchase of products men don't need, namely menstrual hygiene products. And then secondarily, that successful performance of the female gender requires additional and often higher priced products and services than what is required for successful performance of the male gender. For example, wearing makeup, having a skincare routine to combat the effects of aging, how you get your hair cut and whether you color it, hair styling products, and the equipment required to perform styling, whether that's simply clips to keep long hair in place or things like hair dryers, clothing that fits a body with more curvature, which is more expensive to purchase, to alter, and to maintain if it's something that requires professional cleaning. Now, in theory, any of these performances could be rejected, but if all of them are rejected, then the female gender is not successfully performed. And our society punishes that. Freedom from the performance would come at the cost of what our culture agrees is professional appearance for women. So the de facto choice is to pay the pink tax or get financially punished by losing access to the better paying jobs or losing access to the better financed mates. And that choice is analogous to the one women are faced with when it comes to managing a home and their family's schedule. They could simply not do it, not perform the cognitive and emotional labor of family time and affect management, but then they would have to live with the consequences. Those include a disordered home, children not having what they need for school and activities, and failure to execute both social obligations and household chores, which maybe would not be that distressing for everyone, but the flow-on effects would also extend to the mood and emotions of everyone in the house. Emotional dysregulation, explosive conflicts, relational ruptures, and constant interpersonal drama would most likely ensue. That is not a peaceful home for anyone, including the woman who has to live there. Perhaps especially not for the woman who has to live there, given how strongly the instincts for communicating, connecting, and collaborating are for a majority of women. So women choose to take on the burden of caring in their families. that invisible load of deciding that the emotional experience of everyone in their home matters and is worth attending to. Everyone benefits from this labor, but only women's mental health suffers as a result of women carrying the disproportionate amount of that mental labor. The mechanism at work is multi-pronged. First is the extra work itself from that extra cognitive and task load. Second is the extra stress that the extra work creates. Third is stress from what we might call the work environment. See, in some theories of occupational stress, quote, symptoms of strain are observed in employees only when the work environment encompasses high psychological demands in combination with low control possibilities and little social support, end quote. High psychological demands, low control, and low support sounds exactly like the modern mental load that women carry. And finally, in addition to the extra work and the extra stress from the extra work and the stress from the work environment, finally, women have less time available to engage in restorative practices to cope with all of that stress as a result of that extra work. So not only do they have a higher stress load, they also have a lower capacity to process their stress load and regenerate their energy. The result? Depression and anxiety, as one might expect, and again, as the statistics bear out. Even if a woman carrying too much of the mental load isn't struggling with depression or anxiety, a higher stress load detrimentally affects her relationships. Specifically in a romantic partnership, stress becomes a deterrent to intimacy. On an emotional level, resentment often builds because the partner seems either oblivious to the problem or ineffective at helping change it. In the first case, feeling like your partner isn't taking the time to actually understand your perspective and how you're experiencing life and the relationship creates a sense of isolation and disconnection from them. It's really hard to feel close to, trusting of, and supported by someone who doesn't know how hard you are struggling. And this might even extend to a sense of feeling like your partner does not care. Like they don't care enough about you to understand your perspective and how much you're struggling. And in the second case, where your partner has picked up on the stress or been alerted to it and wants to help, when they say, "So tell me what to do," it actually adds more to the mental load because now the woman has to project manage her partner's tasks. In that case, the adult partner can feel more like an extra child, and that is not going to foster feelings of connection and mutual reliance. It is not going to make the woman feel like she can relax because something has finally left her task burden. It is not going to feel like she has a genuine equal partner who is functioning in an equitable, shared dynamic. And there are implications for sexual intimacy too. First, the emotional disconnection makes sexual intimacy undesirable for a lot of women. I forget the exact statistic because it's been a while since I read the book Come As You Are, but Emily Nagoski says in that book that it's somewhere around 60% of women who need to feel emotionally connected with a partner before they seek and can really enjoy sexual intimacy. So if the mental load is interfering with emotional connectedness, there's a high likelihood for, again, that 60% or whatever of women that emotional disconnection is leading directly to sexual disconnection. And even more directly, stress itself interferes with sexual desire for a majority of people, male or female. The number lingering in my mind from that book is 85% of people experiencing lowered sexual interest when they are under stress. So if a woman is carrying a mental load that never ends and never lets up, and it causes her stress, then a certain amount of her stress never ends and never lets up. if she is one of the vast majority, that 85% of people who shut down their interest in sex while under stress, then she probably has less interest in sexual intimacy than she might if that stress were not there. Over time, emotional disconnection and a lack of sexual intimacy erode relationships. Trust diminishes, resentment grows, opportunities to connect and play together in ways that affirm the relationship diminish. And if we're talking about monogamous partnerships, then those are also things that neither partner does with anyone else. Therefore, those needs simply go unmet. Even if a relationship doesn't end as a result of all of these disconnections, its quality depreciates. So, what do we do about this? Now that we have identified this unfair and detrimental imbalance in the cognitive and emotional labor of a household, how can we change it? I'm going to focus on ways that you, the individual woman listening, can maybe get a little relief, because as much as we might hope our partners will help and work with us to reconfigure the relationship, in the end, we can only control our own choices. So I want to offer you things that you can do yourself and a few things that you can ask others in your life to do. If they really are intent on helping, maybe that can start the conversation, give you the ideas that you need for what might actually help you. So the first thing you can do to help your stress load is actually what we've been doing this whole episode: cognitive reframing. By learning about certain dynamics and putting words and labels on them, you can alleviate stress in several ways. First, you stop resisting what is and allow yourself to see it clearly and feel your feelings about it. Second, there can often be relief or validation in learning that you are not crazy for having these feelings. There's a documented and even to some extent measured phenomenon that an awful lot of other people, other women, also experience. You are not alone in this. The phenomenon itself is common, normalized, even if it is not normal in an anthropological sense. There can also be relief in realizing that what you are feeling is completely predictable and explicable, an almost inevitable consequence that your context and experiences create. Third, learning about the pattern opens up hope that it can change, hope that actually you may not have to live this way forever, hope that you can ask for support or let go of some of this extra work, hope that you can find more time to properly take care of yourself. A lot of what kicks stress into distress is hopelessness or not seeing any way to change the situation. We feel at the mercy of our circumstances and not able to direct the flow of our own life and our own energy. The normal activating energy we feel to do something has no place to go if we do not believe we can take an action. And so it will turn inward, resulting in, you guessed it, anxiety and depression. Beyond just reframing your perspective on your own life and relationship and stress load, you can work to close the gap between the demands of your situation and your capacity to meet them. That's another place stress and despair creep in. When we see clearly all of the demands being placed upon us and see just as clearly that we do not have the energy or the time or the interest in meeting all of them, you can work to either lower the demands or increase your capacity, or both. You may or may not be able to close that gap entirely, but you likely will be able to get it a lot smaller. And maybe you can close it or even get yourself into a place where your capacity exceeds your demands. I mean, like, that's the dream, right? So here is a non-exhaustive list of things you might try to either reduce demands or increase capacity. First, lower your standards or expectations of yourself. Really consider how much of what you are doing is because you actually want it or benefit from it, and how much is coming from just conditioning, cultural expectations, family expectations, or maybe an attempt to live up to some ideal that actually you don't really care that much about. You just thought it was what you needed to do. Another option is to degrowth your life. Do less. Maybe the conversation needs to be about doing less as a family. Or if you and your partner don't have kids, maybe it is about simplifying your life to allow you to either spend less time and energy earning money or to spend less time and energy keeping up with the property and the lifestyle that you lead. Conversely, maybe it's about letting go of doing it all yourself. Hire the help if you can afford it. Enlist the help of people in your life to do some of this for you. Like literally get your village involved. Ask someone who loves your kid to support them in one of their activities, including by doing the mental labor to remember the practices and coordinate with the coach and get them to the games and go to all the parent meetings. Basically, get that task entirely off your list by inviting someone else who loves your kid to integrate that activity into their relationship with your kid. You can actively practice self-compassion, gratitude, and mindfulness. In lay terms, be kind to yourself. Focus on the good things that you have so that you experience pleasure and joy amidst all of this work and stress. And be aware of what your thoughts are doing. Are you adding to your stress and mental load by focusing on them even when you don't need to? Are you getting lost in spinning thoughts and disconnecting from your here and now? Don't wait to rest until the work is all done, because it won't ever be done. Instead, ask yourself, have I rested enough to do this work? This shift was really powerful for me, and I'm going to call out ADHD again here because sometimes those of us with that neurotype can get really hung up on all or nothing thinking, or, oh, I'll rest when. And like when it comes to chores and mental load and taking care of your family, there is no when. It will not ever end. And so you have to just recognize that it is phasal work. Sometimes you're doing it and sometimes you have to stop. So again, don't wait to rest until the work is all done. Take your rest when you need it. One interesting option I've seen on social media is to have a time when mom clocks out. Like literally after 9 o'clock, mom is not available for solving your problems or doing work. Sort it out yourself or put it on hold until tomorrow. And that gives mom a chance to let go of the mental load and just exist in the household the same way everyone else in the household does. Obviously, you would need to communicate to your household that you're doing this, and they would have to help you hold that boundary. But if they care about you and if they want you to be able to rest and to take care of yourself, then they should be pretty supportive. Similarly, you can ask for support from your partner and possibly kids in carving out time for you to engage in active recovery practices. This needs to be time that you don't have to perform extra labor in order to do. Like you should not have to set up a meal and an activity for the kids in advance in order to be able to go take a walk or go to the gym for an hour to take care of your body's need to move, or go get your nails done or go have coffee with a friend, or whatever the activity that you want to use to restore yourself is. If you have to do work to go engage in that restorative practice, then it is not actually restorative. There might, in fact, be times when it's either a zero-sum game or you put more energy into getting to do the thing than that thing gives back to you. So again, ask the people who care about you to actively take care of you in return, at the very least by giving you the opportunity to take care of yourself properly. Another thing you can do is to split the cognitive aspect of the mental load differently between you and your partner, or if your kids are older, like between all of the members of your household. So one idea with household labor is to give people domains of control rather than lists of chores. So that takes away the project manager aspect of running the household. If one person has the living room and another person has the kitchen and another person has the bathroom, it's going to be really obvious if something isn't getting done, because that person has total responsibility for all of the chores that go into keeping those spaces clean. So that creates more accountability, and it also allows each person to, within their domain of responsibility, find the workflow that works best for them. Obviously, there's going to be a learning curve if you've been the one managing it or, needing it done a certain way. But it's worth considering as a way to take off that mental load of when was the last time I vacuumed under the couch, or when was the last time I put the oven on a cleaning cycle. That's someone else's to follow if that is not your domain. And even if your kids are younger, this might be an approach that works with your partner. Another approach might be, rather than creating separate areas of control, to just literally share all the aspects of the mental load. Have conversations about all of those things so that they're involved and they're aware of it. Maybe you set up a system where you swap days or you swap weeks about who's the project manager, or, maybe there's a way that you two can collaborate on divvying it all up, but that it's an ongoing, regular conversation, and it is, more importantly, a mutual decision-making process, and not putting all of that cognitive labor to decide everything and manage everything all on one person. And again, my list, non-exhaustive. I'm sure there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other strategies that you could use. This is just a chance to brainstorm, try some ideas, recognize that, maybe there are different ways to do it than what we have been doing. Maybe there's different ways to organize our lives, or different standards that we can hold ourselves to. I really hope that in the coming generations, this disparity of mental load and this kind of performance of gender that creates it will die off. That someday women will not have to pay a pink tax on our well-being in exchange for having a family and having a home that we're proud of. The work of being adult and dealing with the various aspects of life are forces that we're all subject to. We should not be seeking replacements for parents in our partners, but rather seeking someone to make the work feel lighter because we're doing it alongside someone that we love and want to see thriving. And when that flows both ways and both people are actively participating in that work, it feels lighter for both of us. But for those listening who are adults and parents now, and whose cognitive labor and mental load might still be unbalanced, I hope this framework helped you see some of those imbalances more clearly and maybe offered some new ways to try to balance that equation. That is all for this week. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to know more about my work as a coach, you can check out thepatternbreaker.com. If you want to support the podcast and help it grow, recommend it to a friend. Send this episode to your partner to get that conversation started. Leave me a rating and review. Or you can join my Patreon, patreon.com/narrative responsibility. And until next time, what part of your story are you going to take responsibility for this week?